Good afternoon. Welcome you all on behalf of the European Network Remembrance and Solidarity. My name is Urszula Bios. I'm the coordinator of the project High Story Lessons, and I'm also a historian and educator. Today, our guests we'll have two guests. The first of which you can see already, it's Karolina. Hi, Karolina. Karolina Stojek-Sawicka, she's a teacher from the secondary school number 5 in Wrocław, Poland. And Daria, I think you might see her in a minute, Daria Hudinova. Hi, Daria. She's from the Holodomor Museum in Kyiv, Ukraine. They will have possibility to welcome you. Just maybe quick hi to check whether I can hear you.
Hello.
Hello. Karolina, I think it's yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, you're there.
Okay. Everything
yeah,
okay.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's great to hear you. And there's Dagmara, who's my colleague. She will answer to your questions on chat. So your cameras and microphones are turned off, but I invite you to listen actively, to think about your questions, which you will be able to ask within the Q&A session, which will be at the end of our webinar. You can also comment on chat. There are like 41 people today with us, so it's the community you can ask a question to as well. Our webinar will be recorded, but without chat, so your data or image won't be visible anywhere. Our meeting will last 1 hour and 30 minutes, so we will finish at 5:30 p.m. Polish, like Brussels time. After the webinar, I'll send you an email with links and all the presentation you will listen today. And this webinar is funded by the EU, so it's open to everyone, no matter your nationality or gender. Today, you can see now the two goals of our today's webinar. First one is to learn about the Holodomor and its dimensions. And the second one is to equip you, teachers and educators, with resources to prepare a lesson or a workshop or a memory day about the Holodomor in your school or in your institution. I already talked about our today's speakers, but just a little plan for our webinar. Firstly, I will speak about the teaching resources you can use within your work. Then Daria will present the museum's experience in the area of the Holodomor education. And then Karolina, who already tested the teaching resources we prepared, will speak about her experience, how the students reacted to the resources, what are her tips on prepare the lesson about the Holodomor. So just first thing first, about a few words about the ENRS. We are a network of countries which are Poland, Germany, Hungary, Romania, and Slovakia. And our aim is to foster the dialogue about the 20th European history. We've also got observer countries. Those are those blue countries on the map. But today there are representatives of very different countries. So you can write on chat what's your country, from which country you are connecting to our today's webinar. Here on the slide, you can see 6 chosen projects we're running in the ENRS. 2 of them sound in the silence, and in between those are projects who are dedicated for students or for young adults. So I just advise you to stay tuned to observe the next editions of those projects. And 2 others are the 2 outdoor, 2 traveling exhibitions after the Great War and Between Life and Death, which are which the catalogs for those exhibitions you can find online on our website, and they can serve as a teaching resource as well. Turning to the subject of our today's webinar, which is entitled "Remembering the Holodomor." This month, on 25th November, we'll be commemorating the Holodomor Memorial Day. This is Saturday, but it is also commemorated in schools on November 24th, so the Friday before the Memorial Day. And this year we commemorate the 19th anniversary of the Holodomor. We would like to encourage you to address this subject in your school or institution, and it might be a lesson, it might be, as I said, a memory day, it might also be a minute of silence, but shortly speaking, the moment in a busy school life to stop and to think about the meaning of this day. It is, of course, only a day, but it might be an inspiration and a starting point to tackle this complicated and this difficult subject in your work. This webinar is dedicated not only to the teachers, but also to educators, to employees of the memory places. So I'm sure that there are not only a lesson, might be a way to tackle this subject. To start with some background information, in 1932, the Communist Party set impossibly high quotas for the amount of grain Soviet Ukrainian villagers had to contribute to the Soviet state. When they failed to deliver the grain, the authorities started a very brutal policy of collecting the crops, food, animals, seeds, leaving the farmers with no help and without possibility to leave their villages. So the hunger has been caused artificially, is man-made completely, and it's the result of collectivization, but collectivization applied to the areas of the greatest resistance to the totalitarian regime, the largest non-Russian ethnic group within the Soviet Union, so the Ukrainian. That's why most historians agree, and the term Holodomor is often used to speak not only about the starvations of the villagers, but also as a broader assault on the Ukrainian nation, which included an attack on the cultural, religious, and political leadership of Ukraine, and Daria will definitely speak more about it. We need to mention that the Great Famine happened not only in Ukraine, but also in other parts, also in the region of Kuban and in Kazakhstan. So why we believe that speaking about the Holodomor is crucial. First of all, we would like to honor all the people who fell victims of the Holodomor. Secondly, we believe that knowledge about the famine gives us an insight into the systematic and state-organized violence, because as you may see on the graph here, this is the graph which was prepared by the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust, and it tells the story about the 10 stages of the genocide. So we believe that we want to raise awareness on how the genocide is made, to see the signs around us that the democracy is getting weaker, and the path to genocide is in a way prepared. And like the third reason is of course to stand with our Ukrainian friends in times of the ongoing war in Ukraine, to condemn the Russian invasion, and to speak about the history of Ukraine, of this very difficult chapter of Ukrainian history. So that's as a background why we meet today, and then I would like to show you the web page when you can find all the teaching resources we will speak about today. So it's called High Story Lessons, and it's available in 7 languages. The resources we prepared for today about the Holodomor, they're available now in 4 languages: in English, Polish, Romanian, and Slovak. We will work in the following months to prepare the resources in other languages as well. Today I will speak about the English version because it's like the basic one, and you can find it in the tab which is called Resources for Teachers. If you would just go here down, you can find the part of the website which is called Holodomor, and here you've got 4 parts. This educational kit consists of 4 parts. parts. The first one, like the most basic, is called, it's an essay for students. It might be also for you an introductory text, but you can also print it out and give it to your students. And here this just conveys the basic facts about the Holodomor, also the ones I mentioned before in my brief introduction. Then the second part is the presentation. So here in this part, we show 10 monuments of the Holodomor from across the world. We decided to speak through the monuments because we want to raise the students' empathy. We want to deepen their understanding of the Holodomor and also encourage them to be active participants of the public history, to think how the monuments in the public sphere, how they look like. And for example, there are like 10 examples, so you can just look through. For example, this is the memorial which shows that that young children, they've been severely victims by the Holodomor, or this one, which is origin from the USA. It also shows that the wheat, the grain, has been the symbol of the Holodomor, that is very important for the rural culture from the days from the 30s. And then at the end of the presentation, you can find 2 exercises for students, which help them analyze the monument and also to reflect on the public culture in their own country. The author of this resources is Wiktoria Kudela-Świątek. So that's the presentation. And then just briefly about the lesson plan, because Karolina will speak much longer about the lesson plan itself. It's called the Holodomor as an example of disinformation. And because Holodomor has been, is an example of the long-standing disinformation campaign. And here in this lesson plan, students, they read several sources and they compare 2 records about the Holodomor. So there are 2 journalists coming to the Soviet Ukraine, and they are just sending. The one is sending information that the hunger is going on, and the one is in the opposition. So it says that people there are suffering, but it's not so severe. And the task for students is to compare those 2 perspectives. And it might also be a place to reflect about the fact that in the 30s, there was not enough information in the public sphere, that people, they didn't know that the hunger is going on. And now in the 20s of the 21st century, there are like too many information in the public sphere, and like the tragedies which are taking place all over the world are fighting for our attention even. So we believe that it might be a good example, and it might be important for students to analyze the historical sources. And last but not least, in this subject of resources, it's the tab which is called resources about the disinformation, which is like the subject very important for us also now in the times of the ongoing war. And here you can find a lot of other articles and lesson plans on disinformation, which may support, this notion, this skill, this student skill to find the fake news, to find the reliable information online. So now I'll give the floor to Daria to start from this point, and to speak a little bit more about the Holodomor's Museum in Kyiv experiences related to the Holodomor education.
Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for learning the topic of Holodomor and for spreading the information about it. It's really important for us Ukrainians, especially during the ongoing genocide of the Ukrainians, which has been recognized step by step by the world community. And these 2 crimes were related. In fact, these were the Ukrainian uprisings against the Soviet regime and against the policy of the collectivization, creating the collective farms that caused the genocide by the famine and by repression against the Ukrainians. Also, a lot of Ukrainians lived not on the territory of Ukraine, but on the territory of Kuban region. It's southern Russia. It's close to Ukraine, and it's mostly Ukrainian populated area. In 1930s, more than 70% of the population were Ukrainians. So there was Holodomor also there. And if we take the famine in Kazakhstan, it was definitely a man-made famine. It was not really well studied and recognized, unfortunately. They had mm, another, the same purpose to stop the Kazakh people from the attempts to organize their own state. And also, they were destroying their traditional nomadic way of life. So the um, means were different, but the goal was one. It was oppression. It was making people obey to the what the Kremlin, what people in Kremlin wanted. Well, and the museum, the Holodomor Museum, was created only in 2009, many years after the genocide happened. And only in 2006, Ukraine, as an independent state, recognized Holodomor as a genocide. The way was really long because there were decades of silence, and it's a good focus to speak about Holodomor as about something that was had been concealed for decades. Um, so your focus is really good. And now let's speak a little bit about our museum. I'll share my screen to show you the presentation. Well, we'll speak about. Can you see my screen? Unfortunately, the slideshow doesn't work, so I'll
Yes,
show it
but
like
we
this.
can see memory and children, Holodomor
Okay.
context. So it's
Well, we'll speak about the presentation of this topic to children because it's really important. And in Ukraine, there was a long way to find the correct means to do it. And first of all, focusing on the topic of Holodomor, we speak about the goals. If we know our goals, we find our means. And the first and global goal is to prevent the global crime. Because, well, uh, despite there was information about Holodomor, despite the genocide, the Russian genocide of the Ukrainians was recognized, now it's being repeated. Um, Maybe we started a little bit late, but now we have informational means to fight with the present time genocide and the Holodomor experience, and the knowledge about this experience improves the means we can find in this fight, and it's what creates the unbreakable spirit of Ukrainians. Then another important thing we started with is the information hygiene, because it's a challenge of the last maybe 20 years all around the world, to find the proper sources of information and not being um, disinformed by the Russian propaganda or any kind of propaganda. Uh, and on the individual level, we work on individuation of any human being. We work on creating personalities who will make this world a better place to live. And we are focused on creating a sane society made of sane people who are interested in being themselves, and global crimes can be examples of mm, totalitarian regimes enslaving people and preventing them from being themselves. So it's quite a deep topic. It will not go deeper to the psychological things. And first and foremost, we focus on the values: um, democracy, compassion, humanity. That's what makes all this individuation, informational hygiene, and preventing global crime possible. And if we know these goals, we find proper means. And first of all, to make children listen, we um, must make this information interesting for them. And the topics that are not easy can be challenging for children. They can deny, they can close their ears, but if they find some personal meaning about it, like why was my grandma behaving like this and like that because she was a survivor, maybe it will be more interesting for them because their grandma's behavior resulted in how their moms were behaving with themselves. Mm, it's something about the family stories and so on. And the environment we create for such topics is, of course, the safe one. So we avoid traumatizing. We focus on the positivity, on hope, on empathy. And focus is the key because if we focus on something bad happening, uh, it could make kind of re-traumatizing. And if we focus on going through the crime and surviving, helping each other, um, staying together, and staying human, it's another perspective, and it gives the energy to our speech, and it gives the energy to the children listening, and it fulfills our goals, making the society much better. Well, and a few words about the museum. Only the first part of the museum was created, is the memorial part, and the second part, where the main part is under construction. In 2009, the first part was open. It has several places on the street, several monuments, um, and also a hall of memory with the national books of memory, where people can find the names of the victims, the documents, and the testimonies. But the museum itself is under construction, and um, because of the war in Ukraine, we don't know when the construction will be over. We hope that within the next few years. And to save energy, because it's a hard time for Ukraine, we are open only 4 days a week. November is the exception. We are open every day, but uh, all the rest of the year, we are open only 4 days a week. And unfortunately, despite the Hall of Memory is underground, it goes through. It has two exits, and it's not a bomb shelter. We don't have a proper place for a bomb shelter except a narrow corridor where only the museum staff can wait for the air raid alert to be over. Um, Almost every day there is at least one air raid alert in Kiev, and mm, any type of work is really risky. So we stop. If we hear the air raid alert, we stop the excursion. immediately, but in a way not to scare children or adults. And we show them the nearby bomb shelter. Well, in the next part of the museum, there will be a bomb shelter because now we have an experience and we know that it's really important. If we speak about the changes in the work of the museum in 2019, we had a huge hope to create a new touristic center in Kiev. It's not really well explored, and the city is really interesting with a lot of sites. And there were a lot of foreigners. We were hoping for more, but then 2020 came with the COVID pandemics. And we started creating online products. And it worked really well. It prepared us to the war challenges. And in 2022, for a couple of months, the museum was closed. But then, when the situation became not as dangerous as when some cities in Kiev region were occupied, after the occupation of Kiev region, the museum was open again, and we had a lot of tours. And locals, Ukrainians, were really interested in the genocide history because they already understood that something similar is happening. And mm, they wanted to know the origins of the Russian aggression. And Holodomor Museum is the right place to go. Well, and we work with children too. And we work even with the youngest children because wars, genocides are an inevitable thing in the Ukrainian history. It's not the first time. We hope it's the last time, but who knows? And even the youngest children have to know about it, but in the most careful way, not non-traumatizing way, in a safe atmosphere. And only the fact that something bad happened, but without any details and without any depth, because it's too early for them. And usually, young children under 9 come with their families, not in the organized groups. And we conduct not tours for them, but games. We tell the stories, and the interactive things go really well. We have a hidden hiding place game. It's the name of the game, hiding place. Um, when children are helping a young girl who is the survivor of the Holodomor to survive. And through this game, they are learning how what was happening, but in a non-traumatizing way. That this girl was scared, she was suffering, but she survived. We have the optimistic ending, and we develop empathy. We act through the crafts and the action. To make children remember something with their hands. It works really well with young children. And of course, we tell some personal stories, and we speak with adults, with parents, in a way to explain them how to speak with children about these topics. It's also really important. When we speak about the youngest children, we speak also about parents. Um, Children under 14 are much more proper audience for this topic. And we give them in any way a simplified information about historical events. And also we encourage them to ask questions, to be interactive, and to understand. Mm, we show them objects and tools used in 1930s. We play games with them. We focus again on the positivity, on the resources, on the lessons learned, and uh, we give them examples from the lives of children of 1930s, and we encourage them to think what they would do in hard situations, but also we have happy endings, and we are trying to awaken a superhero in any child. It means that any person can live through the hardships and can really uh, mm, do something good, and mm, not only stay in this difficult situation, but work through it, go through it, find a solution. And if children find the solutions in these hard examples, they are filled with energy and they are filled with hope. And that's the most important part of our work, to fill them with hope and to fill them with energy to go through the hardships. Um, as the examples of the lessons, first of all, we conduct online tours. It's the first step to know more about Holodomor. You can connect from anywhere. And at home, people feel safer than in the other places, than in the museum. It's a really important thing. Um, and maybe a person who is scared to go to the museum would start with the online tour. And after the online tours, after showing the video, we have a communication with a guide, and children, adults can ask questions. And we have two variants for the different ages of these videos, for children under 13 and for the for teenagers and adults. Another thing is creating the tree of life. Um, the history of the genocide is the history of the family stories. It works well with the studying the Holocaust as well as Holodomor. Um, and also remembering the life of our ancestors and remembering uh, them and their experience, we enrich our knowledge about ourselves. We create the family tree. We tell each other family stories, and it's a really healing experience, because if even if the story is tragic, we try to find a solution for the problems our ancestors faced, and we can thank them for our lives, because whatever they did, we survived. They gave us life. And we have a lesson on human rights. Um, it's an interactive game about the human rights, about what's right and what's wrong, because in the USSR, what was considered as normal was not normal, in fact. And we are learning what is normal and what is not. Um, and we show it with understandable examples for the children. And again, we focus on the positivity, and we can see what resources we have now. We have democracy. We have a state that allows us to live our own lives, to be ourselves. And maybe the easiest audience is 14 years old and older children, teenagers. But here we have to, and we can go deeper. First of all, these children learn to understand the global processes at school, at history lessons, and it's really important for them to understand them to create their own lives. So we give them a wider historical context. We show it through the causes and consequences. Um, it's maybe the best way to understand the history. So why was a Holodomor organized by the Soviet regime? Why were Ukrainians resisting to entering their collective farms? Well, because individual farming gave people more resources, and collective farming was, in fact, slavery. And children think about it and find their own answers. But teenagers are more interested in relationships than in the global history. So we give them examples from the life of Holodomor survivors in a way for them to understand their relationships and to see what was happening on the level of the family, of the personality, of the community, and of the nation. So we go in the circles from the personality through the family, then community, and then nation. And teenagers love speaking about the existential issues. They are all philosophers. And if they are given examples, what would you do in such a situation? But not really hard ones. Because if we find the situation without any good solution, it would be traumatizing. And teenagers seem to be bold, but they are really fragile, maybe more fragile than the children under 14. So we have to be careful, and they will provoke us. We have to stay adult ourselves because there is a teenager in every one of us. And the teenagers try to appeal to our own inner teenagers. Uh, and the maybe best existential thing is again living through a hardship. When we speak about the structure of a fairy tale, um, a protagonist goes from his ordinary life to the world of the fairy tale, lives this experience, goes through, and goes back to the normal life. But he's changed inside. He grew up. He he got more experience, and we go only through. We don't stay in the traumatizing experience. Is the most important thing. Mm. Then we have interactive lessons for school children who already know about Holodomor, who have listened to our online or offline tours. Um, what is genocide? Here we can understand the terms. We explain what genocide is, and children understand more about what's happening in Ukraine today. And we can fight with propaganda and speculations around this topic. About propaganda, we have another lesson about the informational hygiene. In fact, these are two lessons: art of propaganda and fake news, to make children think independently. In the first lessons, the posters mirror the history. The posters with the Soviet propaganda, children understand the art. And in fake news, we see the difference about fake news and news from the good sources of information. Also, we work with the historic sources of information. We have a lesson, Story of a Diary. We work with the diary of a woman, of a teacher who lived through Holodomor. And she writes about human stories and shows history from a human point of view. And it's a knowledge that we get through the human experience, not the broad knowledge from a textbook, but something people live through. And here we have a possibility to feel more empathy, more compassion to the victims, and to understand on the emotional level what was happening. Again, we have to focus on the positivity here, and we have to live through this experience rather than to stay with them. And the last but not least thing, we are introducing board games now. It's a totally new thing for us. We have a board game from our colleagues from Kharkiv Literature Museum. And it works well to understand the historic events in an interactive way. And it's one of the easiest ways to learn about the tragic historical events without being traumatized by them. Well, I have spoken a lot about the museum experience. Maybe let's go to the question and answer session. I'm stopping my screen share.
Yeah, Daya, I think that we will have question and answers after Karolina's speech. Is it okay?
Okay,
Yeah.
yes, sure.
Yeah.
I'm staying with you.
Yeah, and of course, we will send to you, Daya will prepare the stuff. It's available for you in English. So we will be able to, is it true, Daya, that you can share all the resources which are available in English also?
Sure. I'll send you I'll send them to you tomorrow, if it's possible.
Yes.
It's a list of the resources that will be useful for you to prepare the lessons about Holodomor.
Great.
So I have a quite short list of recommendations, so you'll not get lost.
Yes, thank you very much. Thank you. And thank you very much for all the guidelines you gave in your speech. I just noted down that you said that we are here because of the survivors, which is like a very touching, I think, like an idea that and it's not only applicable for Ukrainians because it's about Ukrainian history, but for others as well, that we are here because of the survivors from our families, and that through studying history, we can find the solutions for problems our ancestors faced. So like the problems they met in the past, we can reflect on how they, if they can be solved at all, actually. Thank you very much, because it was very inspiring. And just for our audience, just, note down questions and so on. And still, Daya, you really stick into the time. So we've got we will have time for Q&A as well. Karolina, yeah? Yeah.
Great that I saw the presentation and I thought it's for an hour. I tried to be brief,
Yeah,
and sorry
perfect.
if I
Yeah,
needed
you can
a long
switch
time.
into the listening mode now. Yeah, Karolina, I leave the floor to you. Just try to, just a second. I think I need to make you the co-host in order to share your screen. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it works.
Okay. Thank you. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I would like to thank you for inviting me to have this webinar. It is a great pleasure for me, and it is my first time for the European Network Remembrance and Solidarity. And the topic I'm going to talk about for the next roughly 30 minutes is the Holodomor as an example of disinformation. Yes, Karina Stajek-Sawicka, as I have been introduced by Ursula, and below you have my name and my email. So if you have any questions, comments, feel free to write. All right. I would like to start with a very short introduction to myself, to my school and students. Here you have a photo of my school. It was taken from the backyard side. So as you see, it is located in a park and surroundings. Okay, I'm a Polish teacher, and I graduated in history at the University of Wrocław, and I'm a teacher from secondary school number 5 in Wrocław, and I have been teaching for 15 years. And my school is one of the few schools in Poland which runs both international programs. It is middle years program and diploma program. And in diploma program, all students are very fluent in English, and they have the possibility subjects they are the most interested in. So all students in my group, they are really very interested in history, and their level of knowledge is rather very high. The topic of Holodomor is included in the curriculum of the diploma program. As teacher, I focus mostly on the history of totalitarian states, with the greatest emphasis put on the history of the Soviet Union and the Third Reich. Okay, and in my group, there is 10 students, and when the lesson took place, there was only 8 of them. So it is rather a small group. It is a huge advantage in the sense that everyone has to be somehow involved in the lesson. But on the other hand, it also has a lot of limitations, as in some cases, in some situations, for instance, during discussion, the exchange of ideas could be late. Okay, yeah, and moving on to the topic. So, as I said, it is about the Holodomor as an example of disinformation, and I want to share with you my ideas, how I prepare the students for a discussion about the Holodomor, about disinformation. I want also to give you some tips how I conducted the lesson and adopted the materials which was given to me to the students. And I also share my experience, my ideas, what we can do, what I did as a teacher to get students more aware of disinformation, which is very widespread today. All right, and I divided my lesson into 4 parts. So in the first part, I wanted to prepare my students for a discussion. And I wanted to provide my students with some basic information about the Holodomor. Then in the second part, our main focus was the sources of information about the Holodomor and how difficult was it to obtain any information was going on in Ukraine. In the third part, I focused on the methods which were used by the Soviet Union to hide the truth about the Holodomor. And in the last part, I focused on the controversy and dispute which is going on even today about the Holodomor. And in summary, I wanted to make a kind of reference to nowadays, to students' personal experience, and so on. Okay. What did I want to achieve? So there were many reasons, a lot of reasons why this material was a good one for me and for the lesson I was planning. Firstly, it was important to me that the students had the possibility to get to know the reasons for hiding the truth about the Great Famine, that in this material we can make a reference to contemporary times. It has the possibility to characterize the process of how historical lies operate and what methods were used to disinform people. And also what makes this material a good one for me and the most interesting for me was the fact that the students could also analyze diverse historical sources. And the last thing was it also raises the question about responsibility for the truth and the importance of it in our life. Do you hear me? Okay.
It is okay, but it's like on the edge, I would say, that it's just cutting a little bit. So maybe you can check your internet connection. But it's okay.
Okay.
If it will stop, we will tell you.
Can I move on?
Yes, 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 yes. I think so.
Wait, I'm sorry. Okay.
No, now we cannot hear you.
Okay, so maybe I will change the slide.
Maybe you can stop the camera
Okay.
and then focus on the presentation. Maybe
Okay,
it will
so
get better.
I will try to continue. Okay, so moving on to the first part of my my lesson. It was. Hey, do you hear me?
Yes, it's okay. I will stop your video and then I think it will get better. We can hear you. Just a short, you know how it works. It sometimes changing the room, it helps. Yeah. Carolina, maybe I will stop your video and then because we might focus not only on your presentation then, and maybe the connection will be better.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, thanks for your voices at the chat. I think that we just need 30 seconds to drink some water.
Okay, and once again, I will try to share my screen.
I think
with you.
it's way better.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you see? Everything is okay?
Yes, yes. Now, Carolina, I will stop your video. Is it okay? Because then maybe it will help the connection.
Okay.
Because we see the big presentation, so maybe, yeah.
Okay, so so moving on to the first part of my lesson. It is how I prepared my students for a discussion about the Holodomor. Yeah, do you hear me?
Yes, it's great.
Okay, okay. The lesson took place on Tuesday, last week on Tuesday, and in the very early in the morning, so it was 8 a.m. So some students were late, some students were still sleeping, and the problem was that the next day was going to be a holiday, a day off. So the only thing the students were thinking about was this holiday. So it was a big challenge for me, as I had somehow to involve the students into the lesson to get them interested in the topic. So I decided to start with the first activity. And I started with terminology. I asked my students, I asked, the first question I asked them was if they recognize the guy who is presented on the slide. And of course, all of them recognize him, that it is Stalin, but I didn't tell them what is going to be our topic, and they didn't see any connection between him and the topic we're going to cover. I asked my students to complete a mind map, which was about totalitarian state, and I wanted my students to work in pairs. And I asked them to write at least 5 characteristics of the totalitarian states. And here I have example answers. As you see, it is one leader, terror, oppression, that there is no human rights, censorship, control over people, and ideology. And after completing this exercise, one student came up to the blackboard and wrote down one characteristic. What surprised me the most was the fact that one characteristic of the totalitarian state was not repeated more than twice. And you can, of course, do it on a flip chart, but it is important to put it in a visible place. So during the lesson, the students could refer to these characteristics. Okay, and what I did as the next step was introducing the topic, and I told my students that we are going to talk about the Holodomor. Okay, and this led us to the next step, which was working with visual sources. I'm a big fan of visual sources, visual materials, because there's always a huge discussion about the messages which are conveyed by visual sources, and and everyone is somehow involved in these discussions. I put in different places all over the classroom the images of different monuments which were established in various countries all over the world. All these monuments commemorated the Holodomor, and I put my students into 4 groups, so still they were working in pairs. And I wanted them to choose one monument and answer the questions you see below. So what does the monument look like? What prompted you to choose this memorial to analyze? What is the memorial representing or commemorating? And what story or message do you think the artist was trying to convey? And how does this monument appeal to you? I put this one on this slide because it is my favorite one. And on the next slide, you have the rest of the monument. And the vast majority of the students, they chose the last one, which present grain, and grain was a symbol of the Holodomor. Yeah, it worked really excellently. I mean, all students were involved, even those who are usually not very active. And I think it was because monument, it was something which everyone could relate to in one way or another. And I think it was also because this exercise did not require a specific knowledge. Monuments more appeal to the emotions. That's why I think everyone was very active. And the last question, which I asked my students, was why should we remember the Holodomor? And they came up with many different reasons. Yeah, so the examples of the answers were, we should remember the Holodomor because it happened and it would help us to understand what was going on today. The next answer was that it gives us deeper understanding of the past events, and also we can feel empathy and solidarity with people who are suffering or dying of starvation. And and also it was one of the first examples of genocide, and genocides also happen today. And also they mentioned that the Holodomor helped us understand how oppressive the state could be, the state which did not respect the democratic rules. And in the end, one student mentioned that the Holodomor is one of the first examples of disinformation, as for a very long time, any references to Holodomor were dismissed by the Soviet authorities. Okay, and the next step. In the next step, I wanted to provide my students with some basic information about the causes and consequences of the Holodomor. So I divided my students into 4 groups, and each group was provided with one part of the essay. So the first group had the Great Famine, the chapter of the Great Famine and the genocide. The second one, causes of the Holodomor, and group 3, lack of support. Group 4, the victims of the Holodomor. Then I wanted them to share information with each other. The atmosphere was really very positive. I mean, the students were really very kind to each other. I think it was because all these parts were about sufferings, were about people who are dying of starvation, and that's why they were behaving like that to each other. Okay, and I wanted them to point out one fact which seemed to them the most important in the context of our topic. I wanted them also to tell me which facts were the most striking to them, and I asked them to find one word with which the author expressed his uncertainty regarding the facts. And it was the question for the last group. So this one which was working with the victims of the Holodomor, this chapter of the essay. Because still it is very difficult to estimate how many people lost their lives in the result of the Great Famine in Ukraine. And the last question, which was the most important for me, was the question, what did you feel when reading the materials and coming to terms with the fact of the Great Famine? It was the most important question because I strongly believe that when we include emotion to history, it is much easier for the students to remember historical facts. Okay, and yeah, and in this way, we moved to the second part of the lesson, which was about different sources of information about the Holodomor. Yeah, and once again, I told my students that there were two accounts of events in Ukraine. And the first one was written, it was the report, which was written by Gareth Jones. He was Welsh journalist, and some students might have heard about him because some years ago, a movie was released about him, and even a book was published about him. And the second source, the second report was written by Anglo-American journalist Walter Durante, and he was also a New York Times correspondent in Moscow in the 30s. So I put my students into two teams, and each team was provided with one source. Then they had 5 minutes to read the texts, and then together we tried to compare these two accounts. I asked my students about the similarities and differences and where the differences came from. I wanted them also to tell me what are the values and limitations of the origin and purpose, and which account was, in their opinion, more reliable and why. Yeah, and in the next step, I asked my student to complete a decision tree, which was to be based on the sources. And in the final stages, I wanted the students to come up with one solution to each of the decision tree, which they believed the best illustrated the cases of two journalists. However, it was the most difficult part of the lesson. Probably it was because it was the first time students were supposed to do a certain exercise. At the beginning, they didn't know what I expect them to do. So we together identified the problem, which was how to write about the Holodomor, about what was going on in Ukraine, and the students discussed two possible solutions. The first solution was to travel in the Ukraine and write the truth about what was going on in Ukraine. And the second solution was to base the report on the Soviet sources of information. And then the students discussed positive and negative consequences of each of these decision. Okay, and then we discuss Walter Durante. Walter Durante was this journalist whose report was based on the Soviet sources of information. So he didn't write anything. That he wrote that there was a famine in the Soviet Union, but nothing special was going on in Ukraine. And he was awarded with the Pulitzer Prize. I asked my students to complete a meta plan. And as you see in the center of the meta plan was the problem, Pulitzer Prize for Walter Duranty, and students had to discuss what is it, how it should be, and why was it not the way it should be, and what should be done. And there was no discussion. I mean, all students agreed that Walter Duranty should be stripped of his Pulitzer Prize after his death. So it didn't take a lot of time. Okay, and we went one step further. It was part 3. Our conclusion from the second part of the lesson was that the Soviet authorities tried to hide the truth about the events in the Ukraine from the very beginning. I told my students that it was very difficult to obtain any information about the Holodomor in the Soviet Union, that any information about the Holodomor was not allowed to cross the borders of the Soviet Union, and Western journalists were not allowed to travel into the Soviet Union without special permissions. And there were even special trips organized for foreigners. During the special trips, the Western journalists were allowed to visit the places which the Soviet authorities wanted them to show. And then I asked my students, why did the Soviet authorities try to hide the truth about the events in Ukraine from the very beginning? And it was a very difficult question. And there was one student who argued that it was because the Great Famine in Ukraine was something which Stalin was ashamed of. And Stalin wanted to create the image of the Soviet Union as a paradise where everyone lived in happiness, and there was no place for the Great Famine. And the last question, which was about the methods used to hide the truth, established a kind of link between the second part and the third part of our lesson, of my lesson. The students came up with many different ideas what methods were used by the Soviet government to hide the truth about the Holodomor. And what was important for me was that they mentioned visual propaganda and written propaganda, which and it was a topic we were going to cover as the next step. And I showed my students 4 pictures, 4 images. The first one, it was a poster. It is a poster, and the rest photos. And I asked them if they see any difference. And they said that 2 of them are propaganda and 2 present the real life in Ukraine in the 30s. And it was the introduction for our debate. Here you have the topic of the debate. So does visual propaganda work as well, or perhaps even better than the written word? It was a debate, and it was, I think, the best part of the lesson, in the sense that everyone was involved in this debate, and some students had huge experience in the Oxford debates, and maybe that is why it worked so excellently. I gave my students 10 minutes to prepare for a discussion, and they had 15-20 minutes to discuss. During the discussion, they followed the principle of democratic discussion. So they didn't interrupt each other. They were full of respect. They were very kind to each other. I was the one who had to stop the discussion. Of course, the aim of this discussion was not to reach conclusion, because it was impossible. The aim was rather to clarify some issues and keep students interested in the topic. So arguments which were mentioned by the students are some examples. So visual propaganda. In visual propaganda, message is not very clear. visual propaganda could be misunderstood, that context is needed to understand the message in visual propaganda in a right way, that visual propaganda requires a level of knowledge, written propaganda, not necessarily. They also argued that visual propaganda is much more effective and it is much easier to convince somebody in doing something by images, and the images appeal to emotions. The students couldn't agree on the definition of visual propaganda, so the question which arose was, if there is a caption put on the image, it's still a visual propaganda or a written one? And the students, they referred to different historical sources. For instance, there was the example provided, taken from the Russo-Japanese War of 1905, and the cartoon which was produced during this war. And the aim of this cartoon was to convince the Russians that they were on the verge of the victory. And also a lot of arguments which were provided by the students, they were based on the personal experience of the students. Yeah, so it was, it's really was wonderful. This exercise went very well. Okay, and the next part, the last part of the lesson was about disputes and controversy about the Holodomor. Here you have on the top of the slide, there is a statement which was our main focus. So the truth about the Holodomor continued to cause controversy and international disputes even today. So once again, I divided my students into two groups. And the first one, I wanted to read two messages which were produced by the Russian side, by the Russian embassy in Ottawa and the Russian Foreign Ministry. And the second group was provided with the European resolution about recognizing the Holodomor as a genocide carried out on the Ukrainians. And I wanted the students to identify the policy of the Russian government and the European Union, and I asked them what were the arguments which were put forward by the Russian side and by the European Union. And this part I ended with the question, why did the truth about the planned genocide during the Great Famine continue to cause controversy and international disputes? And there is an interesting argument which was put forward by the groups, by the group who was working or representing the Russian side. And one student said that today Russia still refers to the idea of Soviet imperialism, and by denying the Holodomor, the Russian government is trying to improve its image, not only its image, but also the image of the Soviet Union in the eyes of the world. And at the next step, it was the final step. Once again, I asked my students to complete a mind map. This mind map was about factors which influenced to a greatest extent the development of the historical narrative and its falsification. So in this part, I wanted to make a reference to nowadays. Yeah, and what was mentioned and what was really very important was the fact that that the greatest influence on the historical narrative had politics. Okay, and in the final activity, in the last activity, I wanted to refer to students' experience. They experience, and I asked them so they were working in pairs. So I asked them to create two questions, questions in which would be establish a link between what we were discussing so far and the experience, and nowadays, I don't know. Then these two questions were passed on to the next group, to another group, and then to another group. So all students answered all questions, and then we compare and contrast the answers. So here you have the example answers or questions. You can read if you like. Yeah, and yeah, some of them were really very interesting. For instance, how can we deal with disinformation? And our conclusion was that, and it was the conclusion which I wanted to reach at the end of the lesson, that still we face manipulation and falsification of historical facts, and we have somehow to deal with it. It was the last part of my lesson. It is everything from my side. Thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you very much, Karolina. I'm so happy that you managed to find the internet also, because I was really worried that it wouldn't work out. Thank you very much for your insight and, all the, important information. For example, the fact that they were sleeping at 8 a.m. and it's really, really hard to start somehow. And I really appreciate that you said that monument is something anyone can relate. So it's like they didn't feel like being tested, Maybe I'll could you close your presentation?
Yeah,
because just to have a short talk afterwards. So the monument is something that everyone can relate, and they're not feeling tested when they join the lesson, and you're not asking the questions about the historical knowledge, and I think it might be a really good starting point. So maybe that's thank you very much, and maybe that's time for your questions. I had once about that maybe just maybe to sum up that not all the but some of the exercises Karina was talking about, they are available in the lesson plan. The Holodomor is an example of disinformation, so the one I showed you before. So maybe just a quick do you have any questions? Maybe you can post them on chat or in Q&A section. That might be a practical question or question related to the history. Yeah, actually, my idea was that I will launch a really quick poll. Maybe it will, if you are, listening on your, for example, on your phone, you can get to the phone. So I will just start a really short poll to ask you, our listeners, to participate. So the question is, are you willing to conduct a lesson about the Holodomor in your school? That's the first question. And there's yes, no, I don't know after the webinar, And the second one, how much do you feel prepared for addressing the topic of Holodomor with your student audience? 1, not prepared at all, and 5, very well prepared. So just, to react for a while. So just please vote in the pool. We've got a comment from Elena that I have no questions at the moment, but I'm really happy to hear about this museum. That's great. Daya, you said that one of the tours is in English. Yes, is it true? The one which is divided between 2 age groups. So so teachers, they can write you to take part in the guided tour.
Ula, there is a question for resend the poll.
Oh, it's open and like people are taking part. It should be visible on the screen.
Mhm.
So maybe just, to refresh maybe. Now, yeah, what about the guided tour? Is it yeah, could you?
Yes, it is available, and you can visit the Holodomor Museum webpage. I'll try to find it and put it on the chat to make it easier. There is an English version, but it's better to contact us and to ask about ordering a tour. It's not really expensive, and well. It could be a good preparation for you to the Holodomor lessons. It's the version for the adults. We don't have a version for children available in English because, well, there is not much reason to create such a version. Local children are really interested and they can listen to this tour with their families. So we created only the Ukrainian version.
Yeah.
Mm.
Yeah, thanks. Okay. I will just share results, and I see two more questions. I hope you can see them. Can you see the results? Yeah, yes. So we've got like 86% who would like to do that. So would like to conduct a lesson. Some of who don't know, of course, because it might be a new topic. And that you feel like kind of prepared, like let's say for 4 or 3 prepared. I think it just requires, reading all the resources, like going through and so on. But our aim was to show you that there are resources which might help you to address this difficult subject, and there are some who already did it. Yeah, so that was about the pool. Sorry that I couldn't start it, because if I would restart it, it will, cut all the answers we already had in the poll. Okay, so there is one question. Carolina, thank you. When you started to teach the Holodomor in your school, this topic include in curricula?
The topic which was included in my curriculum, the curriculum of the diploma program, was about a totalitarian state, so the Soviet Union. And Stalin was the person who was responsible for the Holodomor. That's why usually we mention about the Holodomor. And I started to teach about it, I don't know, maybe 5-6 years ago.
No.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, there is a comment. I really like both presentation. I'm not sure if I will have enough time just to talk about Holodomor during 1-2 lessons, but I can definitely choose some parts from the lesson. I'm teacher from Slovakia, so we had communist regime as well. So I'll definitely use it. Thank you for sharing. Thanks a lot for the Slovakian. Actually, there are only 2 of the teaching resources now. We'll add the rest soon. Okay, we've got like 5 minutes left, and I really want to ask you just to finish like briefly our meeting. Dagmara, could you put the link to the survey on the chat, because we've got a survey, like the EU survey, because as I said, we are funded by the EU, so it would be we'll be very pleased if you could fill the survey. And actually, I got a presentation, but it's not so. Yeah, of course. We've got also other resources, not only from just maybe briefly. Here you can see on the slide other resources from different institutions. I will put all of them in the email again, because, for example, we've got a huge institute for the Holodomor studies in Canada, where there is like a huge Ukrainian diaspora in Canada. So they've got a lot of from survival stories here. So this is then the survival stories you can read. The one below, this is a video with Stalin, which is like totally made by AI. So this is, in a way, this is really good video to put it in the classroom. So there's a Stalin who's obviously an actor who's telling the story. Oh, you're learning about the Holodomor. So meaning that my plan didn't fail. It was a good idea to, I succeeded in my plan of conducting the Holodomor, and then his face changes, it gets blurry. So now we discovered that he's acting like a robot, he's like, he was generated by the AI, by the artificial intelligence. So it's a good movie to start also with the Holodomor and with the disinformation topic. And there's a very controversial, let's say, it looks like an advertisement, like like a luxury product, but it's called Starving to Death, all natural treat bark, when you're ready to eat everything. And it also recalls the problem actually of it's just a fake advert, let's say, but it tells the story. It's also about global climate changes problems, for example, throwing food out today. So I think that actually talking about the Holodomor might be also a good idea to talk about the hunger nowadays going on in a lot of places in the world. And the 100 Days of Murder, this is the story of the genocide in Rwanda, and it's a TEDx video about like the mechanism of the genocide. So that just briefly to sum up, because and I will put all those other resources of other institutions in my email as well. Yeah,